What's up, YouTube? Rob from Fuzzymotion, and guess what? We're back with another True Blood episode review. This is Season 6, Episode 4. Now let's get right into it. Now last week, a few people left some interesting points in the comments. YouTube user Dr. Lovey said that he believed that Warlow was Ben, and he was the one that drained everyone at the Fairy Club. It is an interesting point, which probably gave him the ability to walk out in the sunlight. Markhead93 responded in saying that he thought the governor's plan wasn't to make vampires taxpayers, but rather to use the True Blood factory to poison them all. And guess what? Both of those ideas would have been better in contrast to what actually fucking happened! Let's get right into it. Oh, real quick, totally forgot about this. In the recap of last week's episode, turns out that the untraceable phone Eric was referring to was actually in fact traceable. And poor Ginger had the governor hot on her heels. This episode starts off where the last one left off and Jason's lying on Sookie's floor, agonizing in pain over something. What I don't know, it's never explained to us, I don't even give a shit anymore. Sookie looks for something to help her brother out, while Ben takes Jason and puts him on top of the couch. He then proceeds to show that he has fangs, and gives Jason some of what we can only assume is vampire blood. But we thought he was a fairy, but he turns out to be a vampire fairy sort of mix. Then he proceeds to give him his blood, which we can only assume has healing powers, which would make him a vampire, but he's also a fairy. The fuck? Don't worry, we'll touch on how ridiculous this is, but I'll save that for another instant. Ben happened to be Warlow. Ha! Point for me, YouTube. I halfway called that one, motherfucker. Eric's sister and Sookie's fairy grandfather have some exposition between each other and figure out what Warlow means to both vampires and fairies. There's an opportunity to kill her off, but of course, because this is True Blood, she'll be captured and not killed. Why isn't she dead yet? I can already kind of see where this is shaping up to be. It's gonna be a Ben versus Billith sort of season. I'm telling you. Poor fucking Ginger. That girl has done nothing but try to help Eric out and gotten screwed over every time for it. Last week, Tara took Willow without anybody's permission. And this time, Pam tries to command her with the phrase, "As your maker, I command you." But Tara pulls out the oldest trick in the book as a 2-year-old and starts going, "Ah, la 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 la." Why didn't I think of that? Oh, that's right. This season has to give Terry and Arlene something to do. So Andy's fairy preteens end up reading Terry's mind and figure out that he killed somebody. And Terry's not too happy about that. It doesn't make me, I can't live with what I've done. I could care less about their whole story arc. Well, you gotta admit though, casting for those little bitches has to be a nightmare. They're gonna get older soon, and that's about 12 different actresses for 4 different characters in the last 4 episodes. It's insane! They got reverse Benjamin Button disease? So after investigating where Jason was and seeing that he's sprightly on his feet and walking around like nothing happened, she finds some blood on the floor and ends up testing it to find out that Warlow was near. Thank God she's smart. Seems that Billith is up to his old tricks again. Or would these be new tricks? Back to the preteens for a sec. They end up getting a little bit older and turn into slutty young girls. And they want to joyride in Dad's car and take it out finding some booze and some parties. How do they learn all this? Let's think about this for just a second. If this were a disease like Robin Williams had in Jack, or like Tom Hanks had in Big, they would still have the mind of a child yet the body of somebody older. But it seems like they've learned to be slutty and inconsistent with each other all along the way. So one could kind of ask, how the fuck are they learning all of that? They couldn't have just been taught that. They've been reading people's minds, and who knows what's in Terry's mind, and who knows what's in Arlene's mind. That bitch is cray. They have the mind of a Kardashian in the body of a young 21-year-old. So Andy's girls take his cop car out for a joyride looking for some booze, and Billith is on the way to try to seize these girls and use them for his own bidding, hopefully to synthesize their blood. Jess ends up going in after them because she's afraid that Bill's going to eat them all up limb from limb. And we see a callback to the first episode as the guy from the convenience store in that episode makes his reappearance. That was pretty cool. Does anybody remember when Jason was a V addict? Wasn't that like a whole subplot of season 1? Remember how he was forgetting to go to work and fucking this one chick and just hallucinating all over the place, and his girlfriend got killed because he was too high to help her? Everybody remember that? How does Jason not automatically recognize when he's on V? I mean, it's something that's so supernatural. You're doing 250 pull-ups off the molding of your door, and then the door broke. You would think that after 50 you'd go, something's wrong here. I'm not usually this energetic. Maybe that powdered sugar on those pancakes wasn't really powdered sugar. Either Jason really is the dumbest person in the world, or the writers are just too fucking lazy to look back and remember what happened in the previous seasons. Of course, having had some of Warlow's blood, Jason is forced to have a sexual fantasy about him in his dream. He smacks some shaving cream on him, and then proceeds to nick him as he shaves the side of his face, which he dreams about drinking his blood, and wakes up with a raging boner. Nothing wrong there. You know, back to the girls for just a second. It's like these girls grow in age and in sluttiness, but they never grow in common sense. And you would think that that's something that needs to be taught to you, along with being a slut. It's too bad these girls never got lessons about stranger danger from, like, the Ninja Turtles or G.I. Joe, because they probably never would have talked to Bill or Jess. One scene where Bill talks to his captive, Mr. Takahashi, seems sincere. For a moment, it seems as Mr. Takahashi truly does want to help the vampire kind, but then they have to go and fuck it up. Now, this scene had a lot of potential. It could have ended a number of ways. And what if I fail? Bill could have said, and then all of vampire kind will die. But then beautiful Jessica will die. Then your life's work was all for nothing. Any one of those would have been fine. But he has to fuck it up by saying failure is not an option. It just ruined the tone of the whole fucking scene. The Willow and Eric subplot is really getting boring. I'm getting sick of watching it. So Eric decides that the best way to get the government off of his ass and the rest of vampires in general is to turn the governor's daughter into a vampire. This, of course, sets up for the obligatory shirt removal and burial in the ground. Willow seems pretty willing to do all this stuff, but then she has to slip in the idea that I'm a virgin. Quick, you better pop that cherry, otherwise every time she has sex after that, it's gonna be the most uncomfortable thing ever. Ask Jessica. So now we cut back to the Sam and Lafayette subplot where Emma and Nicole end up getting away with them. Nicole's sitting there on her cell phone going, no one's responding to any of my texts. It's cause they did! But then Emma tries to console Nicole with her 6-year-old wisdom. I'm sorry your friends died. My mommy and daddy died a few days ago. Even Lafayette couldn't help but roll his fucking eyes. Thank God for Lafayette. It appears Sookie has a plan up her sleeve. She's inviting Ben over for dinner in hopes that she can end up poisoning him with some colloidal silver. Is that something you can get at CVS? Halfway through the episode, it finally starts to dawn on Jason that he's not acting normally. And he remembers way back when that he used to have an addiction to V. This proves that he is the world's dumbest fucking person. I can't begin to, you know what, never mind, move on. The fairy grandfather says that maybe he's a vampire fae. We're just inventing shit now, aren't we? So that would mean that a fairy got turned vampire. But in taking all of the fairy's blood, that would essentially kill them and diminish their light. But because this is true blood, you can take them and reinstall them as a vampire? So they can walk amongst the day but not have to worry about what the fucking sense. So Jason and the fairy grandfather decide to take matters into their own hands and seek out Ben in hopes of putting him down before he can hurt anybody else. They go in with a pump action shotgun and a fairy bomb. But Ben's too smart for him and ends up glamoring Jason and draining Grandpa of all his blood, setting Jason back on his day as if nothing ever happened. Which do you think does more damage, buckshot or the fairy bomb? I'm leaning towards the double odd. One minor complaint is that Jason looks away from Warlow in order to say goodbye to his grandfather. I'm confused as to why he couldn't break glamour at that point. Willow did it in the first episode of this season because she broke Eric's gaze for just a second. And Jason, I guess, is that dumb. He can't seem to break glamour. He just can't break glamour. Shitty writing. Also notice that Ben is spitting the fairy grandfather's blood and not drinking it. This will come back later in the episode. Considering my earlier statement that this will be a Billith versus Ben sort of series, it seems that this is more or less a progeny of a progeny versus another progeny of a progeny. Just as a side note here, we see Sookie at the supermarket picking up some items for tonight's dinner. One of the items she picks up is colloidal silver. I wonder which one of Graham's recipes called for that. Probably the silver dollar pancakes. Later we see Sookie starting to prep the house, and this scene sort of reminds me of Nancy getting ready to seduce Freddy Krueger in Nightmare on Elm Street. Turns out the werewolves are hot on Sam's trail. They're looking for him, and they're looking for Emma as well. So the Billith side plot ends up with him taking some of the fairy preteen's blood in an effort to replicate it and hopefully walk amongst the sun to solve some of his problems. Mr. Takahashi ends up saying that there's trace elements of francium found in the fairy blood. Why are you doing that? Why are you trying to give a scientific explanation as to how fairies are different from human beings? You know what happened the last time you tried to give a scientific explanation for something that didn't need one? We got fucking midichlorians. Do you know what francium is? Francium is an alkaline metal and there's only 20 grams of it on the entire fucking planet without using a nuclear reaction. You're gonna tell me that there's francium in fairy blood. Francium's an alkaline metal. You know what happens when you take alkaline metals and you combine them with water? And that's cesium, the one right above francium on the periodic table. If you put francium in anything even remotely hydrated, it's gonna fucking explode. Stop trying to explain things and just get on with it. God damn it. The very next scene, we see Willow awakening as a newborn baby vampire. Eric's new progeny has graced the earth, but she's now starting to realize that she was being used as a means to get back at her father. How didn't you see this coming? You took my life just to see us taking so many of ours. Semantics. It's like the little slutty virgin realizing that she got used for sex. Duh. Meanwhile, Pam and Tara are walking by themselves nonchalantly through the woods. They come across a town, and Pam says, as long as we don't find a 7-pointed star, we'll be alright. What happens at the very next scene, you see a 7-pointed star on the wall. That's not foreshadowing, that's just lazy writing! Sarah gets away, but Pam ends up getting trapped by the government's new vampire Gestapo. We'll have to see how she gets taken out. Maybe some of you are starting to see what I was talking about in the last review. A lot of these problems are being caused by themselves. In fact, the reason Bill was able to see everybody getting captured is really because Eric wasn't willing to work with Bill in the first place. So, if Eric did nothing, this really would have helped out from having to have Bill have these premonitions and having him save everybody. I don't get why everyone can't see this. It's not irony, it's just dumb. Bill has had premonitions about people getting captured. Eric ends up doing things that make people get captured. So in essence, if Eric did nothing, none of this would have happened and everyone would have been fine. If Eric would have worked with Bill from the beginning, we would have been fine. Do you see what I mean about creating problems for the sake of creating problems? Fast forward to Willow's arrival at the governor's mansion. His father is of course disgusted at the fact that his daughter has now become a vampire. And Sarah's there, probably as the significant other. She's wearing a trench coat. I wonder if she's naked under that trench coat. Still a whore. We cut back to the dinner scene and Sookie ends up dousing some of Ben's chicken in colloidal silver. You would think he'd be able to smell it because he's a vampire. Or maybe the fact that he can read her thoughts. Either way, he doesn't end up catching on and he takes a bite of the chicken. Moment of truth. Nothing happens. Oh boy. He's got an immunity for that too. Great. So just like not being able to get staked, he has some sort of fucking superhuman and super immunity to things that would normally kill regular vampires. And the plot thickens. Things are starting to shape up as another dumb love story as Sookie starts making out with Ben on the couch. It's like that episode in the Twilight Zone where they can only think happy thoughts. She can't think anything like, just die, Ben, just die, please just die. Oh shit, right, you can hear me. Hey, it turns out Ben actually didn't kill Grandpa. We cut back to a scene where Warlow is on the bridge with Fairy Grandfather and he explains to him that the guy that let him live that day so long ago was in fact him. And that he spared his life on purpose so that he could lead the fairies. And once again, he's going to spare his life and sends him packing into the Nether Realm. Hooray! Sam, Em, and Nicole finally make it to a safe place at a hotel nearby. And through all the bullshit that this season's thrown at them so far, Sam and Nicole finally get some time for some bow chicka wow wow. Hold it. I forgot to mention the fact that Andy is on the lookout for his daughters this entire time. And he's a little frazzled by all this. Jason finally decides to show up for work and help Andy find his daughters. He says one of the smartest things he said all season. Either that or some vampire glamidon. Brilliant. So now he has some common sense? While Billith is helping Mr. Takahashi work on the synthetic blood, he leaves Jessica alone with the fairy preteens and ends up forgetting what a new vampire is like when they are around 4 different fairies that they've never tasted before. He goes upstairs to find the carnage and all 4 of the girls have been killed. How do you think Vampire Jesus is going to deal with this one? I don't know. But thank God they've gotten killed off. Lord only knows what it would have been like to see those chicks as old girls. We don't need the fairy golden girls around. So Ben shows up to the house and Sookie is wearing what I can only describe as a curtain with underwear. Ben scarfs down the chicken with no problem, thus putting Sookie's mind at ease that he may not in fact be Warlow. They sit on the couch together and start to open up, in more ways than one. Sookie starts to make out with Ben, and just when you think to yourself, wow, Sookie's a really big whore, she tells him to get off by calling him Warlow and has her fairy bomb ready right at the back of his head. Thank God for Sookie. This episode had a lot to it. A lot that I didn't like, a lot that I did like. You could see where this whole season's going. This season's going to have Bill pitted against Warlow in the most epic of fashions by the end of the season. Also with having to save all the vampires that they've come across from internment camps. This might set up for one of the best fights between 2 supernatural beings that we've ever seen. Because as we've seen already, it's hard to kill Bill in conventional ways, and it looks like it's also very hard to kill Warlow because he's not susceptible to silver, and obviously Bill's not susceptible to staking. So what's going to happen? Will Bill forgive Jessica? Probably. I mean, he is the Jesus equivalent, and he didn't look too angry when he came up and saw that she had devoured all 4 of those kids. More or less like, fuck. It appears Sarah Newland's going to be Eric's new obstacle for this subplot, being that he has to get through her in order to get Pam back from the internment camp, and also to get to the governor, and get some changes made around here. I hope Sam just kills off all the wares. Seriously. I hope he just kills them all off, genocide style. Why the fuck not? I'm starting to wonder if maybe sometime all the way back when, maybe Ben killed Lilith with a fairy spirit bomb? It would have made a lot more sense if they tried to explain fairy blood with any one of the other elements that we don't know that much about. Why not just say Einsteinium, Uridium, Neptunium, or how about some fulmented mercury? All I can say about this season so far is that shit is just getting way out of hand. There's a lot of subplots, everything's really hard to keep it all together and cohesive. I feel like I'm jumping from point to point to point, and I don't really care about other points. I just want to know how 1 or 2 of them are going to end up working out. Also, another interesting point, Sookie is part fairy, part human, just like those fairy hybrid preteens were. Why doesn't Sookie age like they do? Shitty writing. Well, kids, we're in it for the long haul. Join me next week when I review episode 5, because as we all know, misery loves company. It's your boy Rob from Fuzzymotion. I'll see you in the next one.